So let's segue from directly from there to focus into different thing. You already mentioned about white paper and ebook. So definitely we produce a lot of white paper ebooks for our clients, for ourselves. So if you have to mention few key formula of success or recipe of success, I know this is too generalization, but in a generic way, what are the key points of success or formula of success?
So when it comes to white papers, it's, well, a traditional concept of a white paper, something's very long, it's 20 over 30 pages, you're going into a lot of depth. And those are definitely key to some of the B2B industries we're talking about, because they do value the detailed technical information and the detailed research that goes into it. But unfortunately, not everybody is able to commit the kind of resources into that kind of approach. So then it pays to talk about what you know best. So if you are selling to your customer and you're very much familiar with what you're selling to them, then write about it. Write about how, what are the ways you have been doing it, what are the best practices that you have been putting into use. Talk about what are the kind of common challenges that your customers tend to face, and how and what are some of the easy ways of solving them. What are some of the recommended ways of solving them. In terms of writing style, obviously, it pays to put a lot of effort into it. I mean, it's important that it reads well. It appears fairly polished. It's easily referenceable. So in this day and age, don't just look at producing a 20-30 page PDF which has got no links at all. I mean, literate with links, literate with references, so people always have an online resource to go to. For not just one, but many, of course. So those are some of the key things to remember when it comes to a white paper, is to really have a very strong focus as well. I mean, you can talk about many things. I mean, definitely when you start writing it, your thoughts will spread like wildfire, like in a forest, and you're going to go into all kinds of channels. So it helps to have a clear flow decided. In fact, it helps to spend a couple of weeks even on committing to a particular flow of content, and then start writing to that, instead of going into thickets of information. Some of the information can also be put into sidebars. Sidebars can be a very it's like a shortcut. I mean, you might want to say more things, but you don't want to make it part of the main flow of content. So you can use sidebars to mention that. You can even use sidebars to quote small case study bits. You can or small bits of information which can help aid the overall understanding of what you're trying to say. Definitely, you've got to look into the design of it as well, because if you just produce it into 5 A4 sheets of plain text, doesn't work. You've got to look into enhancing it with good graphics, with readable fonts, lots of hyperlinking to make it again web friendly. When it comes to design, we have actually produced white papers as well. You can take a look at some of the ones we produce. They we try and adhere to some of the things we're trying to say there. Now, ebooks is something of, I think, who was it? I think David Meerman Scott mentioned it's like a big style. It's a stylish cousin of the white paper. It's a hip, stylish cousin of a white paper. That's because we have a lot more leeway in terms of the writing style. Because again, it's just a kind of compartmentalization, because white paper, people tend to associate it with a very formal, rigid kind of writing, which need not be the case, obviously, but it's just the general expectation from an audience. But as an ebook, people are saying, okay, it's a book, it's this electronic format, so anything goes for them, and they are willing to adapt to it. So ebooks, in that sense, right, they have, you're able to work with the style, work with the content, and be a little more conversational. You can talk to the audience practically, and again, you can have all the online enablement that you want to have in that. So that's something that distinguishes ebooks from white paper. We don't really call it a real distinction, because if you look at our white papers, I think it might look like an ebook to you. So nothing very important. But if you want to make it, you can do that. So the thing about all this content is that more than just writing all this, it's also important to have a live version of this, such as it's got to have a landing page, or some sort of a microsite, if you wish, where the content that you've mentioned in there, it's linked there, so people can link to it directly. And then look at the content you're producing for all this is not just for a white paper or an ebook, as we discussed before, or just as we just discussed. Look into creating content from this. So you can create blog posts. So if you have written an entire ebook with 5-6 chapters, each chapter can spin off 3 or 4 posts. Some of the sidebars can spin off factoids for Twitter. Some of the content you mentioned that can be reformatted into content for newsletters. So that's some of the things some of the beauty of writing content for books and news and white papers is the flexibility you have with the content. So that's, I think, some of the things we can share with what we have done with white papers and ebooks. We would not put any mantras, success mantras, because it really ultimately depends on what you have to say. And if what you have to say really rocks, then people are going to take to it and they're going to spread it for you, even if you don't ask them to. So, and of course, make it shareable. I mean, I didn't make it obvious, but make sure there are plenty of widgets all around to help people share it instantly without having to type it out and send it through their social networks.
Right. So that's great. So while writing, so a little bit deeper level. So tips for writing a good B2B ebook and white paper, or any kind of B2B content. If there are like 5 tips you'd like to share, or something like that. So writing for B2B content, writing style, so copywriting.
Okay. Most important, but often neglected, is give them a reason to read it. So be clear about what you want to write, and be clear about why it should be read. So that means why it should matter to the audience. I think that some of the key things is we like to write what we want to say or what we want to talk about, but that's usually not what people want to hear about. It might be, but it may not be the way you want to tell it to them. So you've got to really write to the audience, and you got to give them a reason to listen to it. So or read it. The other thing is you need to take a strong view. You need to take a stand into what you're saying, because if you're going to sit on the fence, then people are not quite sure what to make of what you're trying to say. So they'll just look at it as a general reporting piece or something. You'll become more of a reporter rather than a writer, because a writer then tends to take a stand in what they say. So that's important. It's very important to have a structure to your overall content. So it's got to be very clearly structured. That means not just in your mind. I mean, you might have a structure in your mind and it may not materialize on paper. It might not look so on paper. So having clear headings, subheadings, plenty of call outs and so on, these things really help in defining a clear structure to what you write. Also remember, you're really talking to humans ultimately, although you might think that there are a whole bunch of white suit wearing people wearing spectacles and poring over technical data. Yeah, but geeks are humans too, and they like to be spoken to rather than being told to or being lectured to. So I think it's good to adopt a very conversational style and use humor as appropriate. It can just be a throwaway line at the end of a paragraph or end of a chapter, but that can really help enhance the reading experience. So has it been 5 yet? Yeah, and of course I think the tone. So as I said, it's being spoken to means having a specific voice. Use the you. You tends to work a lot, because that means people are associating themselves. This is one of the biggest differences between a scientific research paper and a white paper or an ebook or B2B content is this distinguished. Whereas those kind of, the former will talk in a very passive voice, and it will really be very distant from the user, from the reader. You're going to try and make yourself as close as if you're really speaking into the ear. Like it's like a podcast. When you listen to a podcast, it's almost like somebody is having a conversation with your heart. So that sort of intimacy helps. And absolutely, I think confidence. If you write in a wishy-washy manner, that's going to speak through. So even if you're wrong, I think people will appreciate your confidence, people will appreciate your honesty, and people will at least respond to it, saying that you're wrong, right? And that's always good, rather than not having any response at all. So these are some of the things you can look into. And when writing style and all that, there are tons of resources online where, there are great resources like White Paper Source. Michael Selsner is like the father of white papers. I'm sure if you go to those sites, you will see very solid tips on how to write and so on. But these are some of the things we feel, some general tips that can help in enhancing the quality of your content.
Right. So from textual content, let's move to something moving, right? So why video for B2B? So you can explain it like this, that you have to convince someone, a B2B marketing manager, that to use video for B2B. So do that. You have 5 minutes of time, let's say, to how convince me to use.
All right. Well, simple, because you like people talking to you. So that's one thing. You know, you watching video is really like face to face. In some way, even it's not really real time, but you have someone talks to you. That's one thing. And there are many things that you can show more in video, rather than putting into writing. Sometimes it's hard to write something or to describe something, which is much easier to show in moving pictures in video, right? There are a few things about demo or about something that, yeah, as I say, is easier to show rather than to tell. So this is where video plays part. And another thing is, when you have someone talks in video, right? It's not only the words, but there is body language involved. So you have the facial expressions, you have the gestures, which help them to communicate better. So in somehow video does help to communicate better, actually. Right. What else can I say?
Can I just add one thing? I think one thing is sincerity. I mean, the written word, it's just like a tabloid. Anyone can say anything. It can be contorted in whatever way. It can be taken out of context. But when it comes to video, sincerity shows. So when you're listening to somebody talking about how your solution made their life better, it'll show in there. So I mean, they can't fake it. You're talking to a real customer. I mean, unless you're really good actors. But okay, let's take that case away. Sincerity can show. So I think video brings out sincerity as well. I mean, this is again to tie in with the point about body language and all that, because you're not just hearing them or reading what they said, but you're also looking at how they said it, and of course putting them in the context of their working environment. It's different because people are looking at the environment. They see a certain authenticity to that. To what you're saying, because you're putting usually customer case studies. Well, that's what we do. We put them on the site itself. We show them within their environment, and that again adds to the overall feeling of authenticity. So
Yeah, and I also want to draw the illustration. A video or to white paper, a video case study to white paper is the same as movie to novel, for example. In movie or in video in this case, you can direct people more focus on where you want to bring them. Right? When you write something, when you read something, when you read novel, for example, different people can have different interpretation. They can have different pictures in their mind. They can have different images. But with video, it's clear that everyone has the same thought, everyone has the same mind. So yeah, it's more focused in that way.
And you can cover more with shorter period of time.
Yes, of course.
Right. So great.